All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to kind of get started our next story, but just to get a couple reminders, you have that quiz, right? So hopefully you're prepared for the quiz and you've kind of listened to all the lectures before you do the quiz. And the quiz covers everything from the Franks moving forward up to this lecture. So there's quite a bit of information on the Middle Ages that you need to know before you take the quiz. So that's one. Then the other key thing is remember you got your finals coming up pretty soon, the IDs, the essays. I'm hoping you're working on all those. And this topic we're covering today is still relating to one of the topics, which is why the Middle Ages end. And the story is, of course, that of the Hundred Years' War. That, you see the dates there, and the dates are important. And what do you notice about the dates? And I know it's more than 100 years, that's not the issue. What you notice about the dates, I hope, is that this event starts in the Middle Ages and ends in the modern world. Remember, right around 1400, circa, we kind of see the end of the Middle Ages and the birth of the modern world. There are reasons why. We touched on this last time a little bit with the Crusades. We're going to see this in the Hundred Years' War. We're going to see it more in a couple more lectures as we move forward. And so you definitely want to focus on that. Why do the Middle Ages end and why does the modern world begin? And as we talk about the Hundred Years' War, we're going to see that. So for this specific lecture, other than that big theme, we're going to need to know a few things. Basically pretty straightforward: causes, battles, and impacts, right? That's usually what it is with wars. And this is quite a story. So I don't know how familiar you are with the Hundred Years' War, but it's basically a war between France and England that lasts for over 100 years. They're not fighting nonstop for 100 years, of course, but I'm hoping you kind of get some pretty good information out of it. All right, so here are our keywords that kind of lead to the causes of the Hundred Years' War. Get these down, and then I'm going to bring up a map as well. So the first cause of the Hundred Years' War, there's three major causes of the Hundred Years' War. The first one has to do when the King of France, Charles IV, dies in 1328. Lots of names in this lecture again, lots of kings. So, you want to take really good notes and have them handy when you take the quiz, right? You got the open note, open book test, so take advantage of that. But you need to have them really well organized before you take the quiz so you know where to look at, where to find information quickly. So Charles IV was the king of France. He dies in 1328. Not too important, except for the fact that when he died, he didn't have an heir. And when he didn't have an heir, the king of England at the time, a man named Edward III, says to the French, "How about I become the king of France?" And you go, "What, huh?" Well, the reason Edward III says, "I want to be the king of France," he was the king of England at the time, he said, "Well, I have some French blood in me." And he does. Remember, ever since the Norman conquest of England, the two cultures have been intermingling, and he did have some French blood in him, and some French royal blood. And he said he should be the king of France. The French say, "No, thank you." Instead, they find another relative of Charles IV, another cousin of his, I believe, a man named Philip VI, and they declare Philip VI the king of France. So that's the first cause of the Hundred Years' War. Edward III claims he should be the king of France. Philip VI says he should be the king of France. So that's one thing that obviously is going to be the big issue, actually, of why the Hundred Years' War begins. It's who is the legitimate king of France. So that's number one. There are two other issues, the wool trade and this Gascony. I'm going to go to the map to explain those. So here's our maps. There's going to be a series of maps of the Hundred Years' War, and we just kind of start with this top left map up here. And when you look at these maps, and I'm going to show you on all of them, anything you see in the purple is area controlled by England. Anything in the green is area controlled by France. And so when the Hundred Years' War is about to begin, one of the issues was wool trade. And the British had a lot of wool, and they wanted to sell the wool into France. And the French said no. Well, this, of course, upset the British. It's an economic reason for them to fight this war as well. So first there's the issue of royalty line, and then there's also the issue of the issue of the economic issue, and then the third issue is land, right? And down here in the southern part of France, You can't read it well, that's why I put it as a key word. There's a region called Gascony, kind of everything in this red region here. And that area of Gascony was at one point under British control. The British had controlled it through an earlier treaty, but the French, this is all the way deeper in southern France, are like, we're not going to let the British control this land. And over the years, they had retaken control of Gascony. Well, this upset the British as well. So these are, I guess, the three major reasons why the Hundred Years' War begins. You have the issue of the crown, that's number one. You have economic issues, the dispute over the wool trade, and you have land issues over the region of Gascony, specifically another area there called Aquitaine. That these are areas that the British wanted, that the French said, no, we're not going to let you hold on to it. So the tension is building up. Plus, the two, powers don't like each other, and the war begins. So this is essentially how the Hundred Years' War starts, and then we're going to start going into now the next part of the story, which are some of the battles and events leading up to the war. During the war. All right, so these are the key words too. These are the kind of early battles in the Hundred Years' War. You want to know all these, get them all down. This is called the Battle of Crécy. It's actually got one of those little things on over the E. I forget what that's called. Battle of Crécy, 1346. We're going to talk about a man named Edward the Black Prince of England. We're going to talk about another battle, Battle of Poitiers, 1356. Then we're going to talk about John II of France. That region Aquitaine as well is going to come up in this treaty. So get these keywords down. I'm going to go to our map again to kind of tell the story of what happens once the battles begin. And it's really these battles that are going to be pivotal for the Hundred Years' War. And you'll see what I mean by that as we go through our story. All right, so here's our map. Let's look at this map over here on the right this time, top right. And the first battle is way up north here. It's called the Battle of Crécy. I know you can't read it well on the map. That's why, again, I put it the key words for you. And at that Battle of Crécy, you're going to have Edward III against the King of France at the time, Philip VI, right? So Philip VI is the King of France when this is happening. Edward III is the King of England. Now, in the Middle Ages, this is really important here. In the Middle Ages, knights fight, nobles fight. And so at this Battle of Crécy, both sides have their knights and their nobles. They're fighting. But Edward III of England also does something else. Edward III starts to bring in peasants to fight during this Third Crusade at the Battle of Crécy. They basically were bowmen, longbowmen. And they would, get their bows and they would fire the arrows up in the sky, and they would obviously disrupt the French line dramatically. Yeah, I don't know if any of you've gone archery shooting, but you go shoot an arrow, get enough people shooting enough arrows, they're going to hit something. And if they don't hit anything, they're going to spook the horses. And this battle, even though it was fought on French territory, it's always better to fight, at home than abroad. The British win. And the British win because they kind of starting to change the way warfare is working. Why does this matter? Well, this is going to come back later on again, but I'm going to already emphasize it now because it's such an important point. Remember, in the Middle Ages, those who work, those who fight, and those who pray. Those who pray, those who work, or those who fight, right? However you want to put it. And so those who work, the peasants, the serfs, are now becoming those who fight. You have to start thinking critically about what is this going to do to the power structure of the Middle Ages, right? What is this going to do to nobles? What is this going to do to kings? What is this going to do to the peasants, right? It's going to really start impacting the entire feudal structure. Remember how feudalism worked, this core characteristic of the Middle Ages. You have land for military service. You're not going to have that work as much anymore as a result of this 100 Years' War. So when we talk about why the Middle Ages end, this is the type of thinking you're going to want to understand, right? It's not just memorizing dates and battles. It's seeing the domino effect of all these things. So anyways, you have this Battle of Crécy, and the British win. All right, well, we jump ahead 10 years. We go to 1356. 1356, the King of France by now is King John II. That's why I put him up in the keyword, so get him down again. And King John II of France is now going to face another battle against the British, a little bit in the central part of France, and that was the Battle of Poitiers. And that was, again, one of the key words there, so get it down, write it down again. So at this battle, this time Edward III is old. He sends his son, Edward the Black Prince. Edward the Black Prince is there. I don't know if any of you ever saw this old movie called Knight's Tale, and it's this kind of silly, comedy style movie set during the Hundred Years' War. And there's this one guy, Edward the Black Prince. No one wants to fight because he's Edward the Black Prince. So it's all set during the Hundred Years' War. It's a silly little movie, but if you ever watch it, these characters are there. So Edward the Black Prince is going to fight King John, and Edward the Black Prince is very successful again. The British win again. Not only do they win, they, as you can see on our map here, take over a good chunk of real estate. So that Battle of Poitiers, just to remind you, is 1356. And from 1356 to 1360, over the next 4 years, the British just conquer tremendous amount of land here in southern France. All right, what happens? Well, not only do the British win, the King of France, John II, is captured. So what ends up happening is a treaty in 1360. I gave you the name of the treaty. I'm actually not going to quiz you on the name of the treaty. You don't need to know the specific name, but you do want to know what they agreed to. And basically the agreement was that the French would, King John would be released. The British would give up the claim to the throne of France. Remember what the whole issue was? Edward III says, I want to be the King of France. And the British said, okay, we won't be the rulers of France, but you have to let us keep this entire area of Gascony and Aquitaine. So that was the agreement in 1360. And people go, all right, that's fine, that's dandy, that all sounds good. And that's where we are at this stage of the war. Well, it's not the end of the war. Why? Because of what's about to happen next. And what happens next is after this agreement, Edward the Black Prince dies before his dad. And what that does is kind of set off a domino effect from basically about 1360 to early 1400s, where the monarchs in England are weak. They're either children or weak, and they're very weak monarchs. Meanwhile, in those same years, between 1360 roughly and the early 1400s, the French have two very strong monarchs, a man named Charles V and another one named Charles VI. So let's go to our key words so you could get all this down. So what happens now is as we move into about 1400, you had Charles V of France and then Charles VI of France. You could see them both there. They're very strong monarchs. During, again, these years, just to reemphasize again, this is between about 1360 and 1400s, early 1400s. England has monarchs. I'm not even going to give you their names. They're not that significant. They're not going to have a lot of power until we get about to the year 1400. In 1400, the British are finally going to have a really, really strong king, a king by the name of Henry V. And Henry V realized something. He realized that between 1360 and 1400, the French had violated the agreement of 1360. What the French had done is retaken Gascony and Aquitaine. So during these years, they retake this land of Gascony and Aquitaine. So Henry's upset. He's like, wait, what's going on here? The French violated the agreement. And so let me show you Henry V and then talk. So get all these other terms down, right? Get all these other terms down because I'm going to move on. The man named Charles Dauphin, Battle of Agincourt, very famous battle. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that one. Another treaty, and then Henry VI. So the story's about to get really crazy. All right, so get them all down. If you need to pause, get them down, and we're going to move forward. This is Henry V, right? Very famous king of England. Shakespeare did a play on him. Very famous man, very powerful man, young, charismatic, full of energy, a great speaker. And so Henry V, he is going to become the King of France. At first, apparently, when he was a bit younger, he wasn't that, determined to, he's King of England, excuse me, King of England. He wasn't that determined to go after the French, but eventually he says, yeah, this is my land too. What Henry V argues is because the French violated the treaty, he can now claim the throne of France again. So that's essentially what's going to happen under Henry V. Henry V is going to now claim he should be the King of France as well. The French are going to say no. What does this lead to? Another major battle, okay? So here we have this close-up up here of this very important battle in the north, what we're going to call the Battle of Agincourt. So when we get to the Battle of Agincourt, the King of France by now is Charles VI, okay? The King of England is Henry V. Charles VI is pretty old by now. Henry V is much younger. In fact, Charles VI is not even going to be at this battle, right? And so Henry V is young, full of energy. Charles VI is a bit older guy, but they're still going to have this major battle at Agincourt. And so if you look at the map, the battle is fought in French territory. That's one. In any war, it's better to be at home than abroad. Another thing in any war, it's better to have more men than less men. At this Battle of Agincourt, by now, both sides are using a lot of military force. However, the French outnumber the British. And specifically at the Battle of Agincourt, there are about 10,000 British soldiers, right? So there's about 10,000 British soldiers, and there's maybe about 30,000 or 40,000 French soldiers, right? So the French outnumber the British like 3-1, 4-1. They have many, many, many more men. So that's an advantage that the French have. And the other thing is the French, they don't have to conquer any land. All they have to do is defend. In any war, it's easier to defend than attack. So on paper, the French have all the advantages. They're fighting at home. All they have to do is defend, and they have more men. And you go, all right, this should be an easy victory for the French at the Battle of Agincourt. Well, not so much. And the reason not so much is because Henry V understand what he was doing. He was a great military man, and he took advantage of the situation of the time. What had happened right before the battle, I'm going to give you a few details here worth noting of the Battle of Agincourt. Right before the battle, it rained, and the field was muddy. So there's this big muddy field there. And the French just, well, we're not going to worry about it. The British understood this. And what the British do is they took their shoes, their boots, and instead of wearing metal boots, they used cloth. And you go, what's the difference? Well, very important, right? Because if you're walking through mud and you've got a metal boot on, it's not so much the weight, it's the metal in the water and the mud creates kind of a suction. And every time the French soldier tried to lift their foot out of the mud, they're like lifting an extra 10, 15 pounds of weight because of the suction. The British were able to move, really quick around the field because of the cloth footings. So that was one very important point in the battle. The other thing that's important in the battle is there was an area of the battlefield that narrowed. So, if you have this kind of open field, right, and, there's a narrow areaing area here, the French just put a whole bunch of men into this field at one time. We got a lot of men, let's go get them, right? Well, they got so many men too tightly packed together. And because of the mud, some of the French soldiers fell. And they literally just fell on top of each other like dominoes. So, one hit was hit, then one would fall, and they would fall on top of the other. There were too many French soldiers packed too closely together. They didn't have this sound military strategy. So that's a point. So you got, I think, three major things that have the point of the time of the war, of this battle, that impact this battle. Number one is the muddy field and how the British adjusted and the French didn't. Number two is too many French soldiers in a narrow place. Number three is the French soldiers apparently were trying to even capture some British soldiers. The British soldiers were just trying to kill the French soldiers. Why would you try to capture them instead of kill them if you're in a battle? Well, if you capture them, some of them are nobles, you capture them, you ransom them, you make money. The British were not interested in money. The British were interested in victory. And so they just went after the French, and it is a disaster. By the time the battle ends, the British lose a couple hundred men, and the French are losing thousands and thousands of men. And you could see what happens. This is the Battle of Agincourt, 1415. After the battle, remember everything in purple on this map, the British are just going straight down French territory, and they're just demolishing the French. And Charles VI, the King of France, has no way to stop them. Henry V is just that dominant at this point. So we get to 1420. And we get to 1420, and basically Charles VI, who's an old man, goes to Henry V and says, okay, you win, checkmate, what do you want? This is going to be the best part of the story here. And Henry V says, I want to be the King of France. And Charles VI, the King of France, says, let's work out this deal. So this is a new treaty in 1420. And the Treaty of Troyes, that it's up there as a key word. And the agreement was Charles VI was old. And Charles VI basically said, let me die as King of France. I'm an old guy, you're young, right? Henry is in his 30s. Charles, I believe, is in his 60s. Let me die as an old man, as the king. Then the agreement was, listen carefully, that when the King of France dies, Charles VI, the next King of France would be the King of England. Okay? Now, did Charles VI of France have a son? And the answer is yes. Charles VI did have a son. That was Charles the Dauphin, Charles the Prince. And so if there was no 100 Years' War, if there was nothing going on, after Charles VI died, the next King of France should be Charles VI. Okay, so I hope you're following me on all this carefully. So again, I'll say it again because I know it's sometimes a little confusing and I want to make sure you're clear on it. So they make a treaty, and the treaty is that when Charles VI dies, whenever that is, the next King of France would not be Charles the Dauphin, his son, but instead the King of England. Now, when they make this treaty in 1420, everybody assumes that that person would be Henry V. So they make this treaty in 1420. Charles the Sixth is around, Henry V is around, and as soon after they make the treaty, about 2 years or so after they make the treaty, Henry dies. Okay, Henry dies first. Henry V dies of England first. Then Charles VI dies. So that threw everything into a bit of a monkey wrench into the whole situation, because now what? Well, now who's the ruler of France? Who's the ruler of England? Well, Henry V had a son. Okay, Henry VI. Henry VI was his son. Charles VI had a son as well, Charles the Dauphin. But according to the treaty, remember, Charles the Dauphin doesn't become the king of France. According to the treaty, the next king of France is the king of England. And therefore, the next king of England the next king of England was Henry VI. And therefore, Henry VI is not only going to be the king of England, but he's also going to be the king of France. Now, there's one more thing you need to know about Henry V. I mean, specifically about Henry VI. There's one more thing you need to know about Henry VI, and let me show you what you need to know about Henry VI. All right, so what's the deal with Henry VI? Well, Henry VI, come here, is a 2-year-old. Say hi. Yes, Henry VI was a 2-year-old baby. How old are you, Eve? 2. There you go, you're 2. That's right. All right, so that's the issue. So the next king of France and the king of England was Henry VI, a baby. Okay, here you go. Bye-bye, baby. All right, so there it is. Pretty crazy. And that's exactly what happens in about 1422. And so in 1422, bye. No, we're done. Not again. In 1422, hi. Okay, don't worry. In 1422, the King of France and the King of Britain is a 2.5-year-old baby. Who's not happy about this, obviously? Charles the Dauphin. Charles the Dauphin is like, what the heck just happened? You know, Charles the Dauphin is, you know, it's one thing for me not to be the King of France if Henry V is the King of France, right? Henry V is this powerful guy. It's another thing not to be King of France if it's a 2-year-old baby. And this really upset Charles. And Charles like, I'm not going to honor this treaty. I'm going to become the King of France. The problem for Charles the Dauphin is Charles the Dauphin was uncharismatic. Charles the Dauphin was not very well liked. And the reality is Charles the Dauphin, you know, if he had a fight with a baby, I put my money on a baby. And so this was an issue. And at this point, it wasn't clear if the French were ever going to get their independence away from the British. But Charles the Dauphin is going to get help. He gets help from a very unexpected source. Who comes to help Charles the Dauphin? Well, that's going to be our story for next time. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of fun there at the end. You guys take it easy. Thank you. Bye.